Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. You're listening to a new episode of Secure Your Strategy Podcast, where your host, Chloe Mestagi, provides strategies to leaders and managers on how to repair critical issues in security and tech. We're glad you've tuned in. It's time to secure your strategy and your stakeholder approval. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
And welcome to ITSP Secure Your Strategy Podcast. I myself am your host, Chloe Mestagi, and today I have the wonderful Jessica Robinson, who is the Executive Officer of PurePoint International. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here with you, Chloe.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. So right before we got on here, we were wondering, what are we going to talk about? And so
yes.
There's nothing set up here. And we're going to find out what is the thing that's going to be the motivating strategy and the thing that's going to connect and pull us in a direction. So let's first start about your organization. You started a company in security, and I cannot imagine how hard that must have been in many ways. And I would love to know a little bit about what got you to do that first, and then also what was that underlying mission and the thing that really empowered you to go about and build a business? Because it's not an easy thing to do, and it's a huge leap to do.
It is a huge leap. And I never in my life thought that I'd have a business. It still surprises me to this day that I have one. And it all happened because I was on a pilgrimage. Now, before I should say that, I would say that at this point, I had been with working in corporate America for a number of years. And so what I knew was that there was something else I was interested in doing in security. And I also knew that that with the work that I was doing, I wasn't necessarily weaving in all the aspects of security that I wanted. So working with women, working with technology, and just being able to travel more, because I always envisioned my life traveling and working in security. And so but it wasn't in terms of specifically starting the business. I was with the man I was dating at the time, and this was back in 2012. And we went to India and Nepal. And it was a trip that we were on together. And for me, it was very much a pilgrimage. I was a practicing Buddhist. And I had been, and I felt called to Buddhism about 20 years earlier. So at a pretty young age, at about 12. So to have the opportunity to actually go to India and Nepal for me was very personal. And while I was there, we were in India first and then went to Nepal. And on the second day in Nepal, I ate something and I got really sick. And it was really bad. So it was I was throwing up, it was coming out of both ends. It was one of those types of things. It was bad. And I could literally feel my life oozing out of me. That's just the way it felt. And I went to bed that night and I had a dream. And it was my mom's mom who came to me. We were in my grandmother's attic of the house that she lived in, and she had passed away 6 years earlier. And we were getting ready for a homecoming celebration. And within the African American community, a homecoming celebration could be, and definitely in this case, could be a celebration of a death, of a transition of life. And so there was this gathering of a homecoming celebration, and all of a sudden my grandmother floated up the stairs, and we locked eyes, and she floated over to me. And she said, "You can come with me now, or you could stay." And I immediately knew what she meant, that I could die in that moment and I can go with her, or I could stay. And I immediately said I would stay. And she said, "Good, you have much more work left to do." And I remember waking up and just going, "Oh my goodness," what was that? That was powerful and impactful for me at the time. And I was thinking, well, what is this work? What is this work that I have left to do? And it was becoming very clear that it is this work in security and this work of creating a more consciously secure world. And I just saw a globe. I just was seeing this globe of just sky, really sky with different lights like stars. And it was just of supporting women, of increasing consciousness, of creating balance in this world. And that when we can create more safety and security for those that don't have as much as they may feel as if they should or that they would need, and we can create more balance in this world where everyone can be safer. And it wasn't looking at it from just like a digital security or cyber perspective or physical security or just crisis management or anything like that. It was really how do we focus on the whole? How do we focus on the emotional, the psychological, the spiritual? How do we really create this inside and out? And then that began this journey for me, of what did it mean to really birth this into the world. And so I came back from India and Nepal. That was in the spring. By the fall, I created the business, and it started to move forward from there. And the rest was history. So I didn't come from a family of people that were in business. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. I didn't see that growing up. I actually, when I was a kid, I thought, how does even one even begin to start a business? How can you even do that? But it just was so foreign to me. But then there I was doing it, and I had no idea what I was doing, and really had to fail along the way, and continuing to fail now. And it's something that I've really had to learn. Security was always very intuitive for me. I knew at a young age that I would be doing security in the world, and so that was something that always felt very intuitive for me. But being in business didn't, and it's really that mission of creating a more consciously secure world that has pulled me forward to this day. So it continues to do so.
And it's interesting of hearing like the dream and having that connection where you had this like visualization that something is going to happen. This is what you're going to do, but then you don't know what that thing is going to be. And then you're just like probably kicking yourself a little bit like, come on, where's this thing kind of come from?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
What am I gonna, come on. Do I need a journal every day? Like, do I need a whiteboard every day? Like, I don't know. And it's always that thing, that inception that you're like, I gotta do something about this, but what is that? What is this to be able to move forward? And then that's when you have to have the world's most amount of patience.
Oh, patience, yes. And because it's the journey, and part of that journey, and even just crossing over to 10 years, it's like I just feel like I'm even now getting to the woman and to the person I need to be in order to do the work. And I feel like and I think it's interesting because as I look ahead to the next 10 years, I can already see that there are things that I'll be learning over the next 10 years that I won't even be able to do until 10 years. And it's amazing to think about it, but that to me, that is part of this work, and that it is about creating, deep impact and meaningful impact, in multiple different ways that it can happen. And so I'm looking forward to see how the next 10 years evolves in regards to thinking about executing on this mission and continuing to execute on this mission in different ways. But yeah, it's to your point of it just be frustrating. Like I have this, have the vision and, just want to go straight to execution. It's like, it doesn't always work that way. It's so
Wouldn't
much
that be
patience.
nice?
It would be nice. So much patience. Yes.
There's definitely been times where I'm just like, okay, I'm going to just drink a pot of tea and then I'm just going to close myself in the room and I'm just going to just spend the entire day just figuring out what is it that I need to do. And it never comes to you. It's always when you go for like a walk in nature or you go on a trip or you go in the shower. Like it's always random, always in a random moment is when you're most present. I find that when things come to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you're not pushing it and you're just allowing it to be. And again, that's all part of the journey. And it's, and there's so many different threads, that come through, but there are really only a few that really we should really be, focusing on and really continuing to pull and tug and just see kind of how that unravels. And again, it's all the journey. It's the journey along the way. And it's hard to fully know that when you're starting, or even when you're a few years in. It's only really in hindsight where you can see that. So
yeah, I always find that when it happens is when we're working in security, we tend to be disconnected from ourselves sometimes, or we feel disconnected from the world. in some ways. I don't know if that's something that you've seen sometimes when you're working with individuals that, there's a disconnect where they are disconnected from themselves because they're so anxious about what will happen next. I don't have this incident response plan up to date. What comes next? I don't have time to learn this new skill that I need to know. How do I do this? I'm so burned out. So how do I go about learning if I can't even find the time nor the space in my head to do so? And I was wondering if you have any advice around such situations.
Well, at the end of the day, I think it's I think there is a shift that has to happen for, I think, a lot of us in security and how we even relate to our work. And I think that because it is powerful work, it is meaningful work, and to be able to look at it in a multidimensional way, I think is really important. And to not just look at it from a kind of a binary standpoint, or a binary standpoint, and how we can make an impact. If we can also see the gray, if we could also see what it really means for us to be able to actually to create a meaningful impact in the spaces where we are. But I think that is actually a part of growth, and I think that what you're talking about is about how one can become even more fuller into themselves as a human being. And I think it's when that evolution happens, then we could, then we aren't caught kind of in the day to day of how do we just get this done? How do we just get this done? And how do we step back and look more at the whole? And that's really leadership.
Yeah.
And that's where, and that's why it's so important. I have a talk at RSA in April about, it's called the Fearless Cybersecurity Leader and Future CISO. And, there's a lot of questions around what does it mean to be a CISO? Well, the ability to see the whole, the ability to be able to step back, the ability to be able to have gone through and in some cases even witness your own transformation, I think is an important part of leadership. To be able to see the impact that we want, and part of that means moving from that space that you just talked about into a much larger space. And so what I would encourage people, if they're in the day to day, is to find time to support what really is most important for them and meaningful for them in their career, to be able to connect to something larger than themselves, or something larger to themselves, a larger vision of what it is they really want to do, and then what can help them achieve that. Because along the way, if they focus on kind of what's just beyond that reach, then they'll be able to get through the day to day, and they'll be able to and also grow so much more and get so much further.
Yeah, it definitely seems like right now there's a shift happening for CISOs. I think especially after the whole Uber situation of a CISO not having protection. And then there's an article, I think it came out about a week or two, and that was about CISOs and how 1 out of 4 are planning to leave security forever. And it's one of those things where I think early in our conversation about how do we connect with ourselves and figure out what is next for us? How do you give ourselves guidance and when we're overwhelmed in a world of security? And I think the things that go through my mind is that a lot of CISOs right now are incredibly burned out. They're also not being listened to by their board. They're also feeling overwhelmed because they themselves don't know all the technology out there, but also to be technical too. Because I think once you go in that leadership pathway in security, you start removing yourself a little bit more and more from, the everyday life of being a security architecture or, an analyst. And I was wondering if that's something that you've been seeing in your work. And how have you been working with people to try to work through it to keep CISOs staying, or help CISOs stay if that's really what they want to do?
Yes, well, I'm glad you asked that. I will be talking about that in April, and so I'll have probably a more fuller answer then after I've spent more time on it. But What I will say is that it's no doubt that this is challenging, and I, in addition to doing work as a CISO, I work with CISOs and see the challenges they go through, and I advise them, and in terms of just the and see just different complexities of business, right? So whether you're regulated and whether you're in a larger environment or a smaller environment, they all have their different complexities. And what's important is to understand why you're there, because again, you will have the days where you will be lonely, right? You will have the days where you will want to leave. You will have the days where you think you're failing, and you have 30 of those days in a row, and then the question becomes, why am I here? You have tough conversations, and you feel like your message isn't getting through, or that someone's just committed to not supporting what you're looking to do or your vision, or they're not willing to partner with you, and to move forward with you, so that you all could help to move the organization forward when it comes to the cybersecurity posture. And all of those things are really challenging, and it's extremely challenging um, when you don't feel like you have enough support. There's no doubt about that. And I think that when those, knowing for leaders that are in that space, knowing how to take care of yourself is really important. So how you're working out, or what you're doing for fun, or what energizes you, what feeds you, is really important to have a clear understanding of. And then understanding your why, like, why are you there? Why are you doing this role? What is that larger vision that you're connected to? And the larger vision can be to be able to support and provide for your family, right? That larger vision of being able to pay to see your children go off to college. It's different for everyone. And so I think that is really important. And I think what's interesting about this role than a lot of maybe some other roles, just because it is still relatively new, is that new for a lot of organizations, is that you have to really be, there is a certain type of resoluteness that you have to have within yourself. And that's why one of the things I've been saying, or think some of the key things I've been saying recently, is that it is about just who you are. It is about this inner transformation that you have to go through, that you are willing to be on the island by yourself when everyone is not there, or when everyone is looking away, that you can withstand that. That you can walk into a situation knowing that ultimately at some point that will happen. And I think it's not being confused about that, or not denying that that's possible, or saying that that wouldn't happen to me. I think that happens to every CISO, at least everyone that I've talked to. And I think you have to be willing to do things and say things that are grounded in a certain level of integrity for the program specifically, right? Because that's what it's about. Because if you're not willing to fight for the program, then no one else is gonna do it. So, and I think that level of resoluteness is so hard, and I think that you really have to have an anchor into who you are and why you're there, and what it is that you want to see in terms of not just the overall kind of results, but what are some of the other intangibles that are really meaningful for you on a day-to-day basis. So
yeah, it sounds like a kind of like a ping pong situation where you're going back and forth of like, do I want to be here? Do I not want to be here? But it's also has a lot to do with like your environment, yourself. I think that when we are empowered and we're not burned out, it's usually because we feel supported. We're working for an organization that's listening to us. They're not ignoring us, dismissing us. I think when we start feeling ignored and dismissed, or it's just one of those things that just shuts you down slowly, and then you start wondering, what am I doing with my life? And I think what you were mentioning earlier, like, you have to know yourself. You have to do the self work to be a good leader, but also you have to be willing to change too. And that means making changes in your environment. So if you have brought up issues at your company and they're still not listening to you, and you're now just so burned out, feeling ignored, that's going to mess you up so much mentally. And then you're going to have to make a decision, and that decision is going to be you leaving. And I
Mhm.
think that's the thing that a lot of burnout that people don't talk about. Burnout, to heal from burnout, you have to make some really different choices in life.
Mhm.
It's not like, oh, I can recover after a week of like, going on vacation or something like that.
Right.
It's, you have to
Right.
make life changes. And that might be leaving your occupation. So how can we or what advice would you say that we can provide for people that are CISOs right now that are trying to decide, should I stay or should I go? What would be some of the attributes of staying versus going that people can help them while they're processing whether or not they need to make a change in their life?
Yeah, so I think I would say I would start with two key things. One is that for anyone who's a CISO, we're not going to be a CISO forever, right? That's not, it's not, just like people have ascended to that role, for some people they may see that as the end role, but there are other roles ahead of that. So I think part of, or beyond that. So I think part of that is, again, understanding what is your vision? Where do you actually want to be? And I think part of that is also understanding, and not just for your career and for the position you want. And for so many people, CISO may be it, right? Going from CISO to CISO role in larger organizations, right? More complex organizations than what they've maybe experienced. And that's great, and that's a great vision to have. So that's something that can pull you forward. Another thing is understanding the vision and being grounded into why you even do this work, because I think if we're rooted in those two things, like where it is we actually want to be, and what it is that we want to, where we want to be, not just now, but in 3 years, and in 4 years, and 5 years, and 10 years, and we're grounded in our why and why we even do this work in the first place, then I think that we may leave the role that we're in, we may leave the person we're working for, we may leave the company or the culture, but we won't leave the role, right? We won't leave the work of security. And so I think being grounded in those things is absolutely important. And I just can speak from experience because of my own experience. I think that there's no doubt. I mean, even just staying in business, like there have been so many. I've almost been evicted, like because I couldn't pay rent. I mean, there have been so many different things that have happened, but what I was grounded and rooted in what it was I knew that I needed to do within just what I thought I was called to do. And no matter what, even on those hardest days, that is what pulled me forward. And I think that, and I see that with, leaders that we all look up to, whether they're business leaders or global leaders, or leaders that have led movements. There is an anchoring of them being connected to something larger than themselves. And I think if leaders and CISOs are grounded in something like that, then they'll be able to navigate the day to day and move from one role to another role, knowing and finding not only a sense of purpose, but a place where they can contribute and feel really great about it.
Yeah, it sounds like people need to become Ted Lasso. They need to go work on themselves and they need to be a coach to others. Because your job isn't to tell people what to do necessarily, it's more to give them guidance, but also to give yourself guidance too, and give yourself compassion at times, because it's hard. Like our industry is 24/7 all
It is.
around the clock, and there is never a moment where you're like, we're 100% safe and secure, nothing could ever happen to us. There's not a moment like that. And if you think like that, then I think you may need to rethink having your job or learn a little bit more about this industry. And I think that's like a contributing factor that's so unique to our industry, is that it's literally an industry that's 24/7.
Yeah,
There is no
it
such
is.
thing as a break.
No, there isn't. And I think that and it is extremely challenging. I think there's no doubt about that. And so I think the question is how how, particularly depending on how large the team is and all of that, how can you set up ways so that um, you can take time away to be able to support your experience. And I think that there are ways to do that. And I think there are healthy ways to be able to do it, but you have to plan it, right? You also have to have roles that are built in for that. The ones we see most likely are when you actually have a deputy CISO or someone who can take on those responsibilities while the CISO is away, where the CISO can trust that person to make the decisions that are needed, or maybe, if they need to receive a call, that can happen while they're away, but they know that they can trust the team to lead. That they can trust them to inform key stakeholders, and so I think, but that's not, but again, that position doesn't exist in all companies, but I think that there are ways to be able to set up continuity of the business that allow people to take time away so that they can recharge and regroup and come back as their best self. So, but it's not easy.
Yeah, I would say, so basically we didn't know what we were going to talk about, but it's very clear that it's all about now, CISOs have a lot on their plate. And at the end of the day, you may be going back and forth whether or not this is for you. And you have to tie yourself to something of why this is so important. And if you resonate with that, then that means you should stay. But that might be that you might need to make changes. And so work on yourself, focus on yourself, take accountability for your actions, and then figure out what is next for you. That's what I'm hearing here.
Well, it's also what we have control over, right? And
Yeah.
we don't always have control over everything else that happens, or other people, or circumstances in our environment. But we can control ourselves. We can control what we can be honest and truthful with ourselves about what really motivates us and what we really are inspired by, and what we're not. We can be really truthful and honest with ourselves about what it is we really want. We can be truthful and honest with ourselves about how well we're able to take feedback, receive feedback, move forward with certain things. And so it's about controlling what we can control. And I think that always starts with the person that we see in the mirror.
Yeah, which means micromanaging is pointless, everyone. Don't do it. You can't control others. And you're just going to set your team up to fail. So if you're a micromanager or someone's ever said that to you recently, maybe it's time to look at yourself in the mirror and look at yourself and learn to trust yourself so you can trust others. But Jessica, thanks for joining me today. I think this is an episode that I feel like any CISO right now who is trying to figure out what to do next, or if there is a next, that this would be a good guidance for them. So thank you.
Of course, thank you.
All right, everyone. And I'll see you at the next episode. Until then, have a wonderful day.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Secure Your Strategy podcast with Chloe Mastagi, part of the ITSP Magazine podcast network. If you learned something new and this conversation made you think, then share this channel and ITSPmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.